As we talk with folks that are nearing retirement, we come back to the question, not necessarily what are you retiring from, but what are you retiring to? And for some people, consulting income is a great thing to retire to. So today we want to look at some of the pros and cons of what it would be like to take on consulting jobs in retirement. So Spencer, studies have shown that one of the most stressful things that you can do in your life is retiring from your job. And when we think about it, if you've spent 4 decades or more on anything, whether it's work or any sort of hobby, and then just stopping cold turkey, there's going to be hard adjustments to be made. And so some people find their work really enjoyable and they want to continue, but they don't want to continue in the same stressful job. Mm-hmm. Others have been working a job that they really enjoy and they just want to slow down and ease into retirement. Mm-hmm. So there's one way that they can do that sometimes, and it's through consulting work. So you want to walk us through what is consulting work? How do people think about it? And just generally, why should we consider consulting income in retirement?
Austin, as you mentioned, there's a lot of folks that really enjoy what they do. And whether they work with the same company or they work with a different company, they have an opportunity to continue in that level of work, that enjoyment of work, but maybe do so at a slower pace. And oftentimes the employer realizes, well, this person is too valuable to lose. What can we do to keep them with us for 15, 20, 25 hours a week, or maybe even more? So they set up terms to engage with them as a consultant or to keep them on part-time or to be able to move them to a status where they can continue to gain some of the wealth of knowledge and the expertise, while also maybe not having all of the same stressors that have led someone to conclude it's time to move in a different direction there. So these come in all shapes and sizes. We're kind of talking about consulting here, but really we see this in so many different areas, whether it's someone who's been working for a business, and it could be an auto mechanic that just says, I just want to work 3 days a week now instead of working 5 days a week prior with overtime. It could be someone who is a university professor that says, instead of teaching a full load and being involved in committees, I just want to be a part-time professor and get paid 40% of what I was and have no committee assignments and half the number of classes or something like that. So there's all shapes and sizes of this, but it's the recognition that people are enjoying what they're doing and that it's actually going to be beneficial for them in this next season of life if they can continue doing that on some level.
Right. And we always want to come back with everything that we talk about to what are the goals that you have? What do you want to take on in this job? And what opportunities does it afford you? And what are you going to be giving up? If we don't take this within the context of a comprehensive financial plan, sometimes work just to work makes sense. But for a lot of people, they don't need the job and they don't want to do the job. Right. Then we say, okay, is this really worth it? And so really we look at this in the context of that financial plan. And so one of the first things that we want to talk about is consulting can be really flexible and really diverse, like you were saying. Okay, is it just a paring back of the current work? Is it a shift to something totally different? Maybe the employee wants to pursue a hobby that is going to provide some income, but maybe not at the level that their full-time job did. We have to, again, think about what are the opportunity sets, and is it going to be life-giving? We don't want to move from stress to stress. And so if that's all we're doing in consulting, then is it really helping in that greater financial plan?
Well, and I think you bring up an important point. Where is the stress going to be in this next season? We've seen several folks that we work with move from one job to another, and they say, well, I'm going to be retiring over here so I can move over here because I'm going to enjoy it more. Wonderful if that is the case, because sometimes they've been in project management or they've been in a larger bureaucracy and they are knowledge experts in a certain area. And if they can just come in and do some consulting projects and pick what they want to do and give that insight, that can be really life-giving. There are not that many jobs that, again, that level of maybe project management and coordination and working through a bureaucracy, most folks, that's not as much the life-giving side of things. So if they can pivot and move away from that, oftentimes that can be a great fit in that next season. What we have seen from time to time, though, is folks go from one job and then the new company says, oh, we've seen all these other things that you can do. You've been an amazing project manager, so on and so forth. We will give you a 20 or 30% raise if you will do all the things that you did over here, but now you're in the private sector. And sometimes that isn't a great fit because they were retiring over here because they didn't like all those things and they don't need them in the financial plan.
Right.
So the idea had been, well, let's take a quarter of the income or maybe a third of the income over here on the consulting side, pick what projects you want to do, not impair your capacity to see grandkids or do travel or other types of hobbies or service that you might have. So we've got to have that clear vision, again, of what are we retiring to? What is the next season of life moving us to, rather than just say, well, can I do this job?
And we really want to say, if you've worked in an industry for 40 years, you have wisdom to pass on.
Right.
And we want there to be those opportunities and spaces for you to pass on that wisdom, to help the next generation really succeed and thrive. Mm-hmm. But if it's crushing you and your family to do it, then it's not worth it.
Well, and it's so interesting because there's very few clients that we sit down with that, at least after a few months, the first few months, there's often kind of this detox of stress that's able to be moved on, and a level of rest and sabbatical, even. But beyond that, almost every client that we work with, they want to have things that they're investing in that are meaningful to them. And one of the greatest potential risks is that is never identified, because then it's a boomerang effect that someone will just end up right back in the workforce doing a lot of the same things that caused all of that stress, rather than taking the time to assess what are those things that give life, energy, and who are the people, the causes, the activities that they want to really engage in that next season.
Yeah. Okay, so let's move on just kind of from some of that big picture to some of the nitty-gritty details. So when you take on consulting income, it can affect your Social Security in a couple different ways. But let's first talk about how Social Security income is calculated and how taking on consulting income could either help you or not really push the needle. So you want to walk us through that calculation?
Right. So I'm going to put my nerd hat on here firmly. But your Social Security benefit is calculated, and one of the key elements that Social Security will come back to is your primary insurance amount, or your PIA, and how that's calculated. Now, they're going to take your 35 highest years of earning, and they're going to adjust that based on inflation and come up with a primary insurance amount that you're going to be paid once you take Social Security, be that early at 62 or full retirement age in your mid-60s or 66, 67, or you defer it out to age 70. That primary insurance amount is going to be a key figure. Now, if you've already had 35 really strong years of earning, then taking on some consulting income is probably not going to help you at all, because they're going to take your high 35 years in terms of income. And, even if we think back to, say, the mid 1980s for folks that were working then and had, some strong income, they're going to adjust that based on inflation. So you might have only made $40,000 then, but it might be, the equivalent of $90,000 today. And so you would have to have a level of income above and beyond that if that was the lowest of your 35 years in terms of where your PIA sits right now. So it's possible that you could have consulting income, and let's just say you have $50,000 or $60,000 of consulting income. If you've already had a strong earnings history for more than 35 years, you might just have that Social Security, that payroll tax deducted from you if you're a W-2 employee, or taken entirely, that 15.3%, if you're a 1099 employee. You might be paying that and get no benefit. And that's not a non-starter to say that you couldn't do that, but that's just something that you need to know, because you might say, okay, well, they're paying me $100 an hour, and at the end of the day, between federal taxes and this, I've got to have about 40 cents on the dollar deducted. So I'm only really making $60 an hour on a net basis. Is that enough? And for a lot of folks, money is not the key driver, of this. It is the enjoyment of the work. They need to get paid, compensated in some ways, but we just have to recognize that sometimes there's an additional kind of headwind with respect to Social Security if you're doing consulting at a fairly low level and you've got a strong earnings history.
Yeah. Where would it make sense to take on that extra income in terms of the Social Security calculation?
Well, so let's just say we go at it and it's a different way. So let's say we've got an individual who got a PhD and didn't really have much earning going on before age 27. and they worked, let's just say, at the National Lab just right around the corner from us, Oak Ridge National Lab. They worked for 30 years there, retired at age 57. Okay, well, you've really only got about 30 years of strong earnings there potentially. So those last 5 years, if you got $50,000 of consulting income, that might be an incremental advantage, to you in terms of that primary insurance amount calculation. So there's a number of different factors in here, and we don't want to put the cart in front of the horse here. This shouldn't be the primary driver, but it is one of the considerations when we think about, are you getting anything for the tax that you're paying? And Social Security is one of those things that whether you pay it because you're a W-2 employee and it's just pulled out of your paycheck automatically, or whether you have to pay it both sides of it as a 1099 employee, you should just know that is one of the factors of what you should consider.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is when we think about Social Security is if you have retired, you're drawing Social Security, you decided to take your Social Security before your full retirement age, there are some limitations to the amount of earnings that you can get without your Social Security benefit being reduced. Now, there is a caveat to this, is once you reach your full retirement age, the Social Security will readjust your monthly benefit permanently for those months that were decreased.
Right.
So let's look at this and say before the year that you reach your full retirement age, $1 out of every 2 of earned income above $22,320 is going to be held back by Social Security. So every $1 of every 2 earned is going to be pulled back. And that's a pretty low threshold, $22,000.
Right. If we look at this and we say, somehow you've got $30,000 of income that's going to come from Social Security, and you make $82,000. That's $60,000 above. So there's a payback of $1 for every 2. You basically pay everything back.
Yeah. And
it's not going to be fun. It's a kind of an onerous process. It's not something that we encourage people to walk through because there's a lot of back and forth with Social Security Administration. To your point, you're going to be made whole in some sense, and that they're going to calculate that and improve your benefit going forward. But if we know that we've got somebody who's likely to do consulting and they're likely to have significant income that's above and beyond that $22,000 threshold, we encourage them typically not to take Social Security benefits early.
Right. And in the year that you turn your full retirement age, that adjusts again. The income threshold gets higher. It's $1 withheld for every 3 earned. But again, we'd rather not jump through that, if at all possible. So now what we want to do is we want to look at some of the differences in being a 1099 contractor versus a W-2 employee. So the 2 directions you can go, being traditional W-2, that's where the employer is going to cover half of FICA, the employee covers half. But there's also some other benefits as well. So one that we've talked about is that tax withholding. The employer is going to go ahead and have taxes withheld. They're going to pay their side of the FICA taxes. For a 1099 contractor, you're going to have to calculate that, and you're going to have to likely make estimated payments. And so just be aware as you're pursuing contract work, you'll probably need to work with a tax professional, a CPA, just to say, hey, I'm getting this extra income. What do my estimated payments need to be? What do I need to do to make sure that I'm making the government whole? Because whether I do it right now or you do it at the end of the year, you need to do it. And you want to do it throughout the year so that there's not penalties based on the fact that you haven't paid the government throughout the year.
Well, and maybe even the bigger thing in working with a tax professional, CPA or enrolled agent or someone who can help you file taxes there and understands the business inner workings of it is there may be deductions, that you can take there as a 1099 employee that you're just not aware of. So all of those pieces together mean that if you're going to go that 1099 route, you probably want to go it with someone who can lead you through the steps that you need to take.
Yeah, exactly. So one of those tax deductions that you might have available to you if you're a 1099 is there may be health insurance costs that you can write off. And that kind of looks at one of these other pieces is just your health insurance. If you are a W-2 employee, you may be able to get employee-sponsored benefits or employer-sponsored benefits. Now, if you're working part-time, that may not be offered, but there's a potential for that. Whereas if you're a contractor, let's say you're receiving subsidies for your health insurance through a marketplace plan. Well, if you make extra income and it pushes you above certain thresholds, you might lose that tax subsidy. And if you've been banking on that throughout the year, and then a consulting job comes at the end of the year and you decide to take it, it pushes you above, Well, now you're going to have to pay back all those subsidies that you took throughout the year. So we just want to say be aware of the healthcare considerations therein.
Well, and that's not a deal breaker again, but it's one of these things that, the subsidy might amount to 10 or 15%, of the income that you have there. So you have $50,000 of income, maybe you get $5,000 less as a subsidy, or $6,000 or $7,000 less. So again, it's not going to be so bad that the subsidy would be that you would receive would be $10,000 and the income would only be, say, $15,000, and the subsidy goes away. But it's one of those things that is a substantial headwind. So between that and Social Security, like we talked about, the payroll tax, if we found that we're not getting anything from payroll tax, it's increasing the subsidy, or it's increasing the income enough that the subsidy is reduced, we might be at a point where the shadow tax is really 25 or 30%,
right,
in there above and beyond their federal tax bracket, which might be 22 or 24%. So it could mean that less than half of the income that you receive actually goes into your pocket in some circumstances, depending on how you're doing health insurance and some other things.
Yeah. So one of the big benefits that you can have is if you have consulting income, there is opportunities for additional level of savings. And we're going to cover this in another video here shortly. But the reality is, if you make a substantial amount as an independent contractor and you are working solo, you can open either a solo 401k or a solo defined benefit plan, and you can put away a substantial amount of money into some of those retirement plans. You can also open SEP IRAs, simple IRAs, but those, again, we'll talk about in another video. Those are really some substantial ways that you can accelerate savings with that consulting income.
Well, this is a surprise to a lot of folks because there are plenty of people that we work with who have sat down and said, okay, I have a consulting option here. They're giving me an option to either to be a W-2 employee or to be a 1099 employee. What should I choose? And oftentimes we'll say, well, let's see if you can negotiate such that they'll pay you a little bit more on the 1099 side, because you're going to have to pay payroll tax there. You're going to have to pay both sides of FICA, 15.3%. So let's see if you can get a little bit more on that 1099 side, but let's also understand that you have some great opportunities towards retirement savings here, if that's what you want to do, where you might not have those within the W-2 space. Because if you're a W-2 employee, but you don't get retirement benefits, you can't save towards a 401k in that particular job, then that can be a set of circumstances that is really suboptimal compared to being 1099, being able to save well over $200,000 in some circumstances with a solo defined benefit plan, or over $70,000 in a solo 401k plan. So we'll get into that more again in that next video.
So to close this one out, we just want to say, again, consulting income, we really have to put it within the context of a comprehensive financial plan. Where does it fit with your goals? Where does it fit with the desires that you have for life? And if it fits, then great. If not, then let's have a bigger conversation about it. Clients, if you want to talk to us about consulting income, we'd love to have a conversation with you. And we'll see you next time. If you like these financial planning videos, please share with a friend. And if you have questions, go to our website at SeriousRetirement.com. This content was provided by Retirement Planning Services. We are located in Knoxville, Tennessee. You can visit our website at SeriousRetirement.com. The information in this recording is intended for general educational and informational purposes only, and should not be construed as investment advisory, financial planning, legal, tax, or other professional advice based on your specific situation. Please consult with your professional advisor before taking any action based on its contents. Advisory services offered through Retirement Planning Services, LLC.